It's tough walking down the aisle of the grocery store as an economist because there may be 7 different brands of peanut butter and you have to know the cost per ounce of every one of them before you make your choice. And so this set of tools does mean that you have to weigh alternatives. And some of the choices are easy, some are tough. I think that the best solution for our community is to be a community that offers opportunity. I don't believe that in our society we should have equality of outcomes guaranteed, but I do believe strongly that we should have equality of opportunity. And for me, that means every kid needs to have a chance. They need to be encouraged to do the best that they can, but in the end, they're going to have to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. I'm Rick Harper. I direct UWF's Office of Economic Development and Engagement. I'm a professor at UWF in the economics department. I've now been in Pensacola, believe it or not, for, 25 years. My kids both live in town. I care deeply what happens to our community, and I'm happy to be able to work with the Studer Institute over these next several years to move our community forward. I'm very supportive of the mission of the Studer Institute and Studer Community Development. I think the idea that the modern news environment has led to kind of a deterioration of the news cycle, that now we get car crashes and murders all wrapped around USA Today or whoever the major paper is that's affiliated with the local one. I think that's led to a decline in the quality of in-depth reporting. And I think the Studer Institute is exactly correct in trying to focus the community's attention on the things that make a difference, even though they might not be the sexiest topics of the day. They're so important to get right. And so when Randy Hammer and the team at Studer Institute talk about the importance of data-driven decisions, when they talk about the importance of community involvement in the decision-making, and when they talk about the importance of continued community focus and engagement on the key issues, I think that's exactly the right direction to take. You have to have community engagement on a sustained basis before you can really meaningfully address and solve some of the problems that our community faces. To me, economics is the most fascinating way to look at some of society's problems, because you have to talk about the need to choose among alternatives. If we put $1 million into badly needed flood mitigation so that we don't flood as often in our beautiful historic downtown, that may well be $1 million that we can't put into a special program that might benefit students in the schools. How do you make those sorts of decisions? Economics is all about trying to understand the costs of our actions, the benefits of our actions, measuring them through time, and providing a well-informed basis for citizens to make choices. And so that's why I'm so excited about the work that we're going to do together at Studer. Now, how did I personally become involved in economics? I had a great professor. I was an undergraduate at Guilford College, a small Quaker school in North Carolina. And this professor, Fred Parkhurst, I remember him well to this day. He was just a wonderfully engaging and inspiring professor. He challenged you to think about the issues. Back then in the 70s, we were facing an entirely different set of issues than we do today. But he really inspired my passion for thinking about how society should solve its problems. And economics has a powerful set of tools to do that. My job right after college, the first job I got was as a junior economist, assistant economist 1 at Research Triangle Institute in North Carolina. I'm from Chapel Hill, and it was a natural place for me to go. Right. You know, people are really influenced by the culture, by their roots, the people they grow up with, and it was that way for me. I went to a high school where the vast majority of kids went on to college from Chapel Hill High School. Right. There are folks who are at the university or in the Research Triangle Park. And I've talked to people here in Pensacola who tell me the same story, that they grew up and they ended up doing what their parents did. And unfortunately, in some cases, it's gangbanging and selling drugs, and they end up in a sorry situation in exactly the same way that so many of their peers did. And so I think to have meaningful difference, to make a difference for everybody in the community, we have to be sure that we get key questions right. We have to get the education question right. We have to have safe streets, good schools, and I think that we'll be a better community. We'll know we've arrived when every kid arrives at pre-K, eager to learn to read and write. So we've got a lot of work to do as a community. When I was working at Research Triangle Institute, the natural thing was for a person to go on and get a PhD, because that's what you did when you worked at RTI. I did that at Duke, and when I finished and came to the University of West Florida, well, you might imagine that economists try and organize the economics job market the best way that it can be organized. And in fact, all of the new graduates from PhD schools around the country, around the world really, converge on a convention city. In my year, it was New York City. I met the chairman of the UWF department there, was offered that job. We had been corresponding, and I had about 20 interviews in New York. I was flown to the campuses of 4 or 5 different places to have a several-day interview process. And when I looked at the amenities that were available to a young family in Pensacola, Florida, you get paid roughly the same thing as you would in Michigan, but the taxes were much lower, the weather was much better, a family environment. You could be outside 8 months a year, and so it was an easy choice to take the job at UWF, and I haven't looked back, and I've enjoyed it ever since.
Oh, great.
I'd describe Pensacola as a city of beautiful beaches, deep history. We face some of the challenges of the Deep South, but we're a community with unlimited potential. There's a lot of possibility to do good things here. History has given us some gifts. We are lucky to have one of the campuses of the state university system. We're lucky to have a strong state college. We have educational institutions which are so important in the 21st century. And we have other key assets as well. We might not have chosen to put the airport in the middle of the city if we were doing it over again in the middle of valuable real estate, but we did. Let's take advantage of that. The seaport is landlocked. It's 50 acres. Break bulk cargoes probably don't have much economic potential, but there's so much potential with the subsea drilling and exploration that's going on in the Gulf. I see lots of bright possibilities for Pensacola. We need to capitalize on them and to raise the level of opportunity for everybody in the community. I think our community has great assets. We're unique in that we have opera, symphony, museum of art, we have the Little Theater. We have so many artistic assets here. A city of culture, really. I'm passionate about a number of things in terms of personal interests. Right now, I'm pretty passionate about the World Cup. But I'm passionate about making a difference for the community. I think that we have a unique opportunity and challenge at the university. And then in my shop, the Office of Economic Development, we're the folks that handle the data. We're the ones that know what it says and what it doesn't say, how it should be collected, what the right protocols are, what conclusions you can draw from it. And so I'm excited about this initiative that we're entering into with Studer Institute. Things that I love to do when I'm not working. My son has a fishing boat. I don't get to go out on it enough. You know, snapper season is so doggone short in our area, and there's so many snapper out there remaining to be caught. I don't get to do that enough. Home fix-up projects are tedious but fun. I enjoy getting out in the garden. So there's, let's see. If I could play tennis every day, I think that would be a good thing, but I don't get to, so. There are lots of things to like about the Pensacola area. When I first came here, money is tight as an assistant professor. It was one of the few places in the country that I was looking at. I was looking at Washington, Michigan as a place to take a young family, and this was a place where you could buy a home and enjoy some of the beautiful amenities that people think of when they think of Florida. And so I certainly had choices to make. I actively chose Pensacola. I actually had to renege on a job offer once I got this one in order to come to Pensacola. No regrets about that. And now that I'm here, I tell people that I particularly like to call my friends up north when it's February. I enjoy the beach, a walk on the beach in the late afternoon on a summer day, just when it's cooling down and the water is so beautiful and the sunlight is just that perfect end of day set of shades. It's just glorious to be here. Economics is all about making choices and making intelligent and informed choices. You have to figure out, if you go down one path, what have you given up? You've given up the opportunity to make the other choices which existed for you at that time. And that's so important for policymakers. I feel like the science, the tools of economics can offer a lot to our policymakers, our councilmen and women, our county commissioners, other elected officials face tough choices about what to do with limited resources. And so economics is very powerful for understanding the choices that you make. What are the consequences? What are the unintended consequences of actions that are taken by policymakers? And so I'm very interested in being involved in the policy environment to help our community make the smart choices and be the best that it can be. You know, when I go to the grocery store, I actually have to look at the price per ounce of every product before I purchase it. The brand may not be so important. The attributes may be. You know, there's a whole science in economics of understanding how much a certain size motor is worth in a car. We use statistical analysis to do it. And with a bunch of colleagues like that, you'd better believe that it's not the easiest thing in the world to make consumer choices. So it's a great science, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy thinking like an economist. The goal from today forward, as I look at the years that we hope to be engaged with Studer Institute, is to make the community a better place, a place where everybody can have opportunity to be the best that they can possibly be. I mean, that sounds cliche, but I think it's a realistic objective to create the opportunity for people to make a better life for themselves. Well, an economist is someone, you know, the old joke is that an economist is someone who can tell you tomorrow why yesterday's forecast didn't come true today. But really, economics is the science of choices. And in my role as kind of the outward-facing economist for the university in the Office of Economic Development. I mean, my colleagues in economics do lots of public service work at the university, but in my particular role, having the Haas Center report to me, the Florida Small Business Development Center network, I'm responsible for helping policymakers make smart choices with limited resources. And so to me, that's the name of the game, is let's make the best choices we can. Given that we can't have it all, how do you make good choices? You know, this year actually marks 35 years for me as a professional economist at the undergraduate and graduate level. And economics as a discipline offers you the tools to think about what the income distribution impacts of a certain set of choices are. It offers you the tools to look at who wins and who loses, and those are extremely important considerations. Capitalism is great at creating efficient outcomes. It's not so great at creating equitable outcomes. And so there are trade-offs that you face, and economists are going to have to be able to make statements about those trade-offs because they are important for the health of our community. What's happened on Wall Street over the last number of years is not a great thing. It's not great to bail out Wall Street at the expense of Main Street. You know, banking should exist to put lenders in touch with borrowers, to help allocate resources to their most highly valued use. People who are savers have funding that we need to get to people who have worthwhile investment projects. Economists can have a lot to say about that, and yes, it does matter very much who wins and who loses in society. So absolutely those questions are important. I look forward to working with colleagues both in the political sphere and at Studer Institute and elsewhere in addressing those issues realistically. Sometimes you can't always get what an economist would consider to be a first best solution. In my work at the legislature these last 2 years, I've seen plenty of instances where you know, the economically optimal thing, for example, let me give you an example from right here in Pensacola that when Senate President Don Gates asked me, well, Rick, what about a new bridge across Pensacola Bay to replace 3 Mile Bridge? I said, absolutely, Mr. President, we need it, and it should be a toll bridge. We shouldn't in Pensacola pay for bridges in Miami with our tax dollars, and people in Miami shouldn't pay for bridges in Pensacola. With their tax dollars, we should have a toll bridge. And it was right then and there that President Gates gave me a lesson in politics, which was, Rick, there's a chance that we can get this bridge without it being a toll bridge in Pensacola, that's what we need to do. And so in economics, you have to compromise. If you're going to make smart policy, you have to pick your fights well. You have to know which ones are possible to win. You have to know which ones are important to win. And I've had a great time working in the legislature these past 2 years addressing issues exactly like that. What's doable? Pension reform, for example, we addressed in the legislature this year. We didn't get the bill we wanted, but that it's going to come back again in a future year. And so there's tons of issues. There will be tons of issues like that in our community. I'm looking forward to working with the Studer Institute team to take a smart look at those things and push forward where we can and where it makes sense, and then realize that there's some issues that we're just not ready to tackle.